Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I will start the next part of the chapter that you are reading, that's general toxicology. In this chapter we'll be dealing with a poison's definition, classification, how it presents itself in a living body, what are the common signs and symptoms, how a poisoning can be diagnosed from a dead body, and how the samples are to be preserved for detection of that poison. So in our last class, I have discussed what is the definition of poison, what is the classification, and what are the factors that modify effects of that poison on our body. I hope that it was clear to you. Now, with that knowledge keeping in mind, with that background, today we'll try to discuss how poisoning can be diagnosed in a living subject and in a cadaver. The diagnosis of poison is a little bit different than diagnosis of other diseases because in a poisoning patient, the patient usually comes to you in a serious condition. So collection of blood, sending it for the analysis and waiting for the report to diagnose poisoning is not an option. So you have to clinically examine the patient, and from the history plus signs and symptoms, you have to diagnose what is most likely the poison that had happened. So here the taking of a meticulous history and understanding of the signs and symptoms is much more important. Etymology of poisoning in India. This I will discuss with reference of two papers that was published in peer reviewed journals. The first paper, it was published in the year 2005. There is a National Poison Information Center which is run by the Forensic Medicine Department of AIIMS New Delhi. In that Poison Information Center, from the 3-month period of April 99 to March 2002, the the total number of calls that were received in a poison information center, there's a toll free number. People from anywhere in the country can call them to report that such and such poisoning has happened. What should I do? This call can come from an ordinary citizen to learn about the basic first aid that can be given at home, or by a doctor in a peripheral hospital with limited resources to have to seek help while treating a poisoning patient. So, on the basis of the calls, the paper published that the highest incidence of poisoning was in the range of 14 to 40, that is in the late teens to the middle age group. Uh, And contrary to common belief, males are the most common victim. In 57%, the victims were male. It's usually suicidal in nature in 53%. The rest are accidental. Homicidal were very negligent in that study. The route were mainly oral, and the incidence of poisoning was due to household chemicals primarily, followed by drugs or agricultural pesticides, industrial chemicals, animal bites, things like snake bite, and plants. Another paper, it was published in the very recently, 2019, uh, in an international journal that dealt with the homicidal poisoning. In that paper, the prevalence of homicidal poisoning was varied from 0.3% to 3.7% different year. And there are also regions in the country where there was zero homicidal poisoning. However, the poisons most commonly were organophosphate, aluminum phosphide, as in rat paste, terratwort, it's an agricultural pesticide, and arsenic. So this is how the scenario of poisoning is our country. So what we should bear in mind that the common age group is this: teens to middle age. Males are usually the common victim. Commonest method is suicidal, followed by accidental. Homicidal is rare. Most common method is oral, and most common poison used are the household chemical, followed by drugs, followed by agricultural pesticides. Okay, so this is the take-home message from this single slide about the poisoning scenario of India. Now, how do we diagnose poisoning in living? So, as I said, in a living subject, poisoning has to be diagnosed by combination of a meticulous history taken plus signs and symptoms. Now, a collection of signs and symptoms is usually known as syndrome. So, in a poisoning patient, the signs and symptoms which are present are called toxic syndrome. So, a doctor has to diagnose on the basis of the presentation that which toxic syndrome is present. For the meiosis is caused by cholinergic drugs, mydriasis is caused by anticholinergic drugs. There you go. The list of the poison. Now, diagnostic orders. From the order itself, few poisons can be diagnosed. So, in case of poisoning from the person's breath or from the clothes itself, certain odor can be present. If and presence of this particular odor can indicate what poison is responsible here. Acetone smell is the apple-like sweet smell. It is found in ethanol poisoning or isopropanol poisoning or chloroform. Acrid, that is sour taste. So pear-like smell. This is present in chloral hydrate or paraldehyde. Bitter almond. This is found in cyanide. Bitter almond smell. Burnt rope type smell is in marijuana. Cold rash in carbon monoxide. Disinfectant, the typical hospital odor is in carbonic acid. Garlic smell in arsenate, organophosphate, phosphorus, thallium. Mothball is for camphor or naphthalene. Musty or fishy odor is for the aluminum phosphide or zinc phosphide. Rotten egg or the typical hydrogen sulfide smell is present in carbon disulfide or mercaptans. True polish is in the nitrobenzene. True polish light smell is found in the nitrobenzene poisoning. Vinegar type smell is in the acetic acid poisoning. And wintergreen, oil of wintergreen, that smell is present in the methyl salicylate poisoning. So from the smell, you can guess about the responsible poison. Now we'll discuss the diagnosis of poisoning in death. How poisoning can be diagnosed in a cadaver while examined in a cadaver. Okay, so here there are three photographs. Let's start from the leftmost. In this person, on the face, chin, and both chin and there is some marks. These marks are hyperpigmented marks. So these are a type of burn marks due to chemical. What chemical? A corrosive acid. So in a corrosive acid poisoning, when the person try to ingest the acid or an alkali, whatever, a corrosive poison, due to intense pain due to corrosive action of the poison in the oral mucosa, the hand will tremble, for the acid will or acid or alkali will splash. So burn marks is possible to be found in or around the oral cavity, around the mouth. Similarly is this. And this third one, pardon me for the bad quality of picture, it is from a gastric mucosa, stomach, and this is a perforation. So this perforation in the stomach wall is produced due to corrosive acid. So from these three photographs alone, we can say that corrosive acid can be diagnosed by the chemical burn marks around the mouth or perforation in gastric mucosa or So there will be corrosion of the skin and mucosa, and there should be marks of a stain or vomitus. This stain, this color is not due to the acid alone, also due to the this corrosive action on the oral mucosa. There will be bleeding. That blood will react with the acid, producing acid hematine, which is in coffee color, light coffee color, brown color. So this brown stain is due to that vomitus. Vomitus containing coffee ground altered blood. In postmortem chapter, in the postmortem science, we have read about postmortem staining. There are certain typical postmortem stain which appear in a certain specific poison. So from the color of the PM staining alone, we can diagnose the poison. In carbon monoxide poisoning, the PM stain is usually cherry red in color. In cyanide poisoning, it's nearly a closer color, cherry red to pink. However, distinguishing that in naked eye in an Indian population is very difficult. These two will appear the same. In phosphorus poisoning, the color is dark brown to yellow. Nitrobenzene, aniline, or the all nitrogen dye, the as I the postmortem stain will be chocolate colored, and hydrogen sulfide poisoning or the mercaptans, there will be greenish yellow postmortem stain. So, and in the previous slide where we talked about the specific order, that order can also be present in a fresh cadaver if you dead the body within first 1 to 2 hours of death. Then from the body even and from the clothes even you can get the typical order. This is a cherry red stain in carbon monoxide poisoning. Look at the color. As the person is a very fair complexion, the cherry red can be easily discerned. Color, a brown color in phosphorus poisoning. Characteristic smell, as I said in the other slide also, in a diagnosis in living, the same is applicable in diagnosis of dead. Garlic in phosphoin, arsine gas, arsenic, etc. Sweet হচ্ছে ethanol, chloroform. Rotten eggs হচ্ছে hydrogen sulfide, mercaptans, etc. Fishy odor in zinc phosphide, aluminum phosphide. Or opium, it has its own characteristic odor. Phenol has that typical hospital disinfectant smell. Camphor has that naphthalene light or modball light smell. So that poison whichever is used has some effect on the respiratory system, maybe in the electron transport chain even. So this can be a feature in cyanide poisoning which disrupts electron transport chain but not a constant feature. Ulceration of mouth, as you can see, the entire mucosa is blank, it is white colored and there are black or brownish ulcers. This is due to corrosive acid, corrosive poisoning. For corrosive, that can be acid, that can be alkali, that can be organic or inorganic. Now look at this picture of the stomach. This is the stomach, this is the greater curvature, this is the lesser curvature. The liquids, any liquid, they usually follow the lesser curvature, and so this part is called mesenteries. So the shaded region indicates the area which is mostly affected by corrosive acid. So in a food filled stomach, the solid food they occupy the greater curvature. So the acids, the ingested acid, they will cover the lesser curvature. So more injury is supposed to be present here. However, in an empty stomach, due to following the gravity, the acid will accumulate in the lower half. So both in the lesser curvature and greater curvature, in the lower half, the injury will be there. So, but as a dictum, while opening a stomach in a poisoning victim or in any victim for any postmortem, as a dictum, we always open the stomach by leaving an incision along the greater curvature. Don't forget it in your entire life. Okay. So the two ligatures are given in the cardiac end, two ligatures are given in the pyloric end, and it is divided in between the ligatures. Now we take the stomach out, put it on a tray, and with the scalpel, incision is given along the greater curvature. The stomach is opened, so the content is there in the tray, and we can see the magentous area for any corrosive injury. This is a hyperemic stomach. In case of corrosive acid poisoning or alkali poisoning, any corrosive or irritant poisoning even, the stomach wall, the gastric mucosa will be hyperemic. Intense hyperemia will be there. And while teaching arsenic, I will tell you, but there's no harm in saying again. In arsenic poisoning, the gastric mucosa is so much congested that it is described as red velvet appearance. So red velvet appearance is characteristic of arsenic poisoning, and this hyperemia of stomach is seen in any corrosive or irritant poisoning. In corrosive poisoning, it indicates mild poisoning or a shorter duration. Longer duration, the stomach mucosa turns black like this. Okay. The stomach mucosa turns black like this. This is the lesser curvature. As you can see that the lesser curvature shows blackening due to corrosive injury or intense corrosion. And this is the esophagus. This is the esophagus opened, and this is esophageal ulcer produced due to the corrosive action. This is stomach wall. Okay, and this forceps is passed through a perforation. So this indicates perforation. Mucosa gastrica means gastric mucosa. See the rugae. This rugae will identify it is a stomach. So this is a perforation. And this one is due to the perforation, the acid has leaked into the peritoneal cavity and reached and caused chemical peritonitis. This is the mesentery showing signs of peritonitis. Inner, and this is mucosal hemorrhage, submucosal petechial hemorrhage, and this is the typical coffee brown colored vomitus or coffee brown colored stomach content in corrosive poisoning due to action of the acid on blood producing acid hematine. Petechial hemorrhage in kidney, and this is seen in common where not in corrosive poisoning because they will be because a corrosive poison ingested will no way can affect kidney this way. This is seen in this can be seen in viper snake bite or the hemotoxic snake bite. We will discuss during the snake bite chapter how this happens. I'm just showing you the picture. This is the pulmonary hemorrhage. This can be seen in paraquat poisoning. Paraquat is an agricultural pesticide. We will read about the agricultural poisons in our next chapter. So paraquat commonly causes pulmonary hemorrhage. This can be caused by any poison which causes coagulation abnormality or fulminant hepatic failure like phosphorus. Okay. So now the most next important part, preservation and analysis of viscera in case of poisoning. So as the photographs show, from the photographs we can get an idea that this is a corrosive poisoning or might. So when viscera should be present? From the circumstance and the autopsy, you have a strong suspicion that poisoning can be the cause of death. So you must preserve the viscera. Cause of death cannot be found even after complete autopsy. Autopsy is done, but you are clueless about the cause of death. You have no idea. Everything looks normal. So you preserve the viscera. There is a history of addiction or intoxication. There, if it's a trace of criminal abortion, to rule out influence of drug in cases like drowning, because drowning is almost always accidental unless otherwise proved. I have told you, but drowning can be homicidal if there's some intoxication. So that needs to be ruled out. Hand in is usually suicidal or accidental, rarely homicidal. To rule out homicide, you must rule out the influence of drug. So in these cases, you should preserve the viscera. Circumstantial. So suspected alcohol intoxication in road traffic accident. In a road traffic accident, uh, from during post-mortem, there is a smell of alcohol from the stomach content. But smell of alcohol is not a proof that alcohol is consumed. So you must preserve the viscera and send them for detection of the alcohol. Death in OT devil due to anesthesia or some surgical fault. So they are so viscera must be preserved to rule out any type of anesthetic overdose. Any other situation where autopsy surgeon may deem fit. So these are the scenarios where a viscera should be preserved. And some autopsy surgeon they are over cautious. They preserve viscera in almost every other case. Some autopsy surgeons they are much adventurous. They don't preserve viscera unless it's absolutely indicated. I personally try to follow a middle path. Uh, if I'm 100% sure about the cause of death and it's not poisoning, I know that it's clear cut hanging or clear cut drowning, clear cut burn, and there's no foul play other than accident or suicide, then I usually do not preserve viscera because our forensic science lab has already a mountain of viscera there and they are years behind. If I send the viscera today and if I get the report after 2 years, I'm I'm way too fortunate. So let's not overburden them. They are already overburdened and understaffed. So these are you must be cautious and judicious while preserving viscera. Don't need to be too much adventurous, don't need to be too much overzealous. So think about this whether there's if it's poison you have to preserve. If there may be even a hint of suspicion that an intoxication or drug influence can be there, you must preserve viscera. And in case of obscure autopsy where cause of death is not known, even after doing everything, you must preserve the viscera. Now, the routine viscera preserved. Which are the routine viscera that we preserve? The routine viscera is stomach with its content, with the entire content, whatever is there inside the stomach, and proximal 30 centimeter of small intestine, 500 grams of liver along with the gallbladder and common bile duct. If in a children the liver weighs less than 500 gram, take the full liver. Longitudinal halves of each kidney, not either kidney. You have to take longitudinal half of each kidney because one can say only one kidney should suffice because no, in case of a renal artery stenosis or unilateral renal failure, some poison can be excreted through the healthy kidney, not by the diseased kidney. And at the autopsy table, by just naked eye observation, you cannot say which one is functioning and which one is not. So always take longitudinal half of both kidney. Along with blood, minimum 30 ml, usually 100 ml, but usually 30-40 ml is taken. Urine, same amount. These are the viscera which must be collected. So let's recap. You have to remember it in your whole life. Doesn't matter in which specialty you are in. If you are in government service, you have to do postmortem some point of time. So the viscera to be preserved are stomach with content, proximal 30 centimeter of small intestine, 500 grams of liver along with gallbladder and bile ducts, longitudinal half of each kidney, blood and urine. Now, how many containers? Three containers. One container for the hollow viscera, that is stomach with contain the small intestine. Put them in one glass jar. Glass jar 2 will be for the solid viscera, so the liver and kidney put it that. One for the one vial for the blood with preservative, another vial will be for the urine with preservative. And these two glass jars, these viscera, they have to be preserved in some preservative. What preservative we will discuss in the next slide. But that preservatives sample should be there in the vial 3 as the control. So there are three preservatives. There are three preservatives: one for the viscera, one for blood, one for urine. So both of all three preservatives must be there as control. So two glass jar, five vials. These are preserved. Ideal preservative is rectified spirit. But I, in my small career of 5 years in forensic medicine, never seen rectified spirit in any more because it is costly, not supplied by the government, it is inflammable, and the contraindications are alcohol, acetic acid, phosphorus, kerosene oil. This poisoning, in this poison, rectified spirit is contraindicated, but it is never supplied by government. So what do we use? We use saturated solution of common salt, cheapest possible available. Saturated solution of common salt. This also has few contraindications. These are the corrosive acids, mainly the inorganic acids like hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, etc., and heavy metals. So in this, you have to indent for a rectified spirit. Which preservative used for the blood? For the blood, it is fluoride or oxalate. In pathology, you have read about different preservatives for what? Oxalate is there as anticoagulant, and fluoride is the enzyme inhibitor. So they are given together as preservative. These are the special viscera. Whatever I told you now is the routine viscera. These are the viscera that are preserved in all in any postmortem case of drowning, hanging. If you feel like that you should preserve viscera, then these are the viscera you should preserve. But in some specific poison, some specific special viscera needs to be preserved. In arsenic or oleander, yellow oleander is a cardiotoxic. So here heart should be preserved. Brain and spinal cord in the neurotheater spinal poisons, alcohol, barbiturate. Lung should be preserved in anesthetic deaths and these poisons. In any type of gaseous asphyxiant gas poisoning and in anesthetic deaths, lung should be preserved. If anesthetic drug was inhaled, inhalational anesthetic was given, lung should be preserved. Spleen, hemolytic poisoning, end of long bones in case of heavy metal poisoning, like lead, etc. Because lead has a tendency to accumulate into the bones. Uterus with the appendages should be preserved in a case of suspected criminal abortion. Preservative is the same. Now, which analytical methods are used? So, it's as a your duty is to preserve the viscera with the turret preservative. Now you seal the jars, label them, and hand them over to the police. Now, police will take them to the forensic science laboratory. What they will do? First, they will separate contents of stomach and macerated viscera. They are dissolved in water. Then a solvent is used to extract the poison. After that is the purification. Chemical purification is done on the basis of the pH. Then is the technique. What are the different techniques used? Thin layer chromatography or high pressure liquid chromatography. Principles of chromatography has been taught to you in the biochemistry in first year. Dash chromatography or dash chromatography mass spectrometry GCMS or UV spectrophotometry. These are the different analytical techniques which are done to detect the poison. Now, what we have done the postmortem, we have preserved the viscera, sent them to the uh, FSL lab, but after a year of waiting, you get the report as no poison could be detected. Now, what will you do? It is possible that a death was due to poisoning, but the report came negative. When if the poison is completely eliminated by lungs or it is evaporated, so it was a asphyxiant gas poisoning or a inhalational anesthetic was given in the OT, and by that time the patient died. Most of that has been expired out, and even it's a volatile poison. So while during autopsy, even it has evaporated. So they have failed to detect. Completely expelled from the body by vomiting or purging in case of irritant poisons, corrosive poisons. In mainly irritant, they can be eliminated by vomiting. Completely metabolized in the body by conjugation or detoxification by liver or eliminated by kidney. It was completely oxidized in the body and converted into some other chemical. Or it's a rare poison which cannot be detected by the usual analytical techniques. Biological toxins like venom, snake venoms, they are protein in nature. Snake venom is nothing but a collection of protein. So it's very much difficult to separate from the body tissue or from the body proteins. And these are the most important points which are mentioned at the last. Insufficient viscera preserved or faulty preservation technique. Sometimes it's our fault. We we fail to preserve the viscera by in the correct way, or the body has come late. So by that time we do postmortem, but the body has already started putrefaction. So in a decomposed viscera, detection of poison is very difficult. Or the most important point, long interval between preservation and analysis. As I said earlier, FSL department is so backlogged, overburdened and understaffed. If we send the sample today, and if they are even able to test it 1 year later, you are very much fortunate. So by that time, most of them are under the putrefaction. So these are the reasons when the report can come negative even if poisoning is the cause of death. So this was the last slide of today's class. So in today's class, my main focus was on the detection of poison. So in In a live-in, you must be able to detect the clinical toxic syndrome by the signs and symptoms alone, whether it is cholinergic or anticholinergic or sympathomimetic or sedative. Now, if you can put the patient in any of that four category, then you can suspect the offending poison and you can apply a treatment. Even if it's not the specific treatment, that that treatment will at least help you to buy some time. And diagnosis of poisoning in the dead, it mainly depends on the naked eye observation of the tissue changes in the oral cavity, esophagus, stomach, liver, kidney, or in lungs. If there's any hyperemia or hemorrhage or ulcer perforation, then you can detect it by naked eye observation during autopsy. If these changes are not there, and even if they are there, in all cases of suspected poisoning, even if you just remotely suspect that poison or any type of drug or can be present, then you must preserve the sample. What are the routine viscera preserved? I will repeat again so that it hammered you into your head once again. Stomach with content, proximal 30 centimeter of duodenum or small intestine, 500 grams of liver with bile ducts and gallbladder, longitudinal half of each kidney, and blood and urine. What are the preservatives used? Ideal preservative, rectified spirit. Not used because costly, inflammable, and it is contraindicated in chloroform, and it's contraindicated in chloroform, alcohol as its spirit, so you cannot use it in alcohol poisoning, it will be false positive. And the commonest used preservative is saturated solution of common salt. It is most widely available, we do it every day, and it is contraindicated in inorganic acids like hydrochloric acid and heavy metals. So this must be the take home message. You must remember it in and hammer it into your brain. There are some certain special viscera, extra viscera should be preserved. In case of a narcotic poisoning or a say cerebral or spinal poison, brain and spinal cord, heavy metal poisoning, you should preserve the end of a long bone, the epiphyseal end. Arsenic, you should preserve the heart or hairs. In case of a criminal abortion, you should preserve the entire uterus with the appendages. In case of an anesthetic death or a asphyxial gas poisoning, you should preserve the lungs. So, and if even if doing everything properly, the report can come negative because of these reasons. So, this is the take home message of today's class. I hope I have been made you understand, and if you have any problem, please ask me anytime and go through the book. It's a very important chapter. That's why I have divided into three parts. Next day I will discuss how any poisoning case must be treated. Any poisoning case comes to the emergency department. As a doctor, how you should approach the case, how you should go about the treatment. So thank you very much for your time and patience. Have a good day.